Well, this certainly was a long time coming, to say the least. So, initially, I wasn't intending to make a review for this particular movie. This is mainly because this was a movie I was against for a couple of different reasons that I'll get to in a bit. Though, here's the thing. It wasn't always like this. Because the reason I went ahead to do a review of this movie is out of obligation as a DC fan. I have been sticking with this franchise for quite some time now when it comes to animated shows, comics, video games, and especially movies. The DC heroes have always been my preferred group as opposed to Marvel. So naturally, I was honestly fairly excited for the prospects of a Flash movie. The character is very iconic, being known for his super speed and being an all-around lovable character who tends to be quippy and has a well-developed backstory, depending on which version of the character you're talking about. With DC making full effort to compete with Marvel a while back, these once were thought of as prospects of the Flash getting a movie was seemingly becoming more of a reality. They got a decent up-and-coming actor known as Ezra Miller taking on the iconic role, and it seemed like DC fans' dreams were going to become a reality, with this being one of the major films to look forward to. So, what could possibly go wrong here? Well, how about the fact that during the time after Man of Steel, the DC Cinematic Universe has gone through an insane level of inconsistent quality of their movies, leading to a lot of shuffling around with directors, writers, studio execs, and everyone else constantly trying to change or save this universe through whatever means? Yeah, to say that DC hasn't had a rocky history this decade is a bit of an understatement. I saw in real time the unfolding of how the DC Cinematic Universe seemed to have gone off the rails with the amount of crazy decisions made for this series and the constant discourse around these movies and what they mean for comic book fans and movie fans everywhere. This included The Flash, which had quite a production history that's hard to really condense into one video. This ranges from what it would be about, who would be in it, who would be directing it, as this movie really had a lot of different ideas intact before leading to the movie we have now. You know, you would think someone like me would become cynical after all of these things going on with DC. But I have to admit, I come into these movies with a little bit more optimism at points. Sure, I'm not going to act like DC has always made underrated gems with this universe, because in the grand scheme of things, there is a lot to critique about them. Yet, I can't go that negative on them in most cases, cause as a fan, I've always wanted to see these characters get a proper big screen treatment, especially seeing how Marvel was able to be so successful with it. And while I will point to the DC movies that suck, how about the ones that were actually really good? Because DC has made some good, dare I say, even great movies from this past decade, regardless of whether or not they have been a part of this core cinematic universe. It can be a crapshoot sometimes, but when a DC movie comes around to being really great, that's when my eyes light up and I feel like I am truly witnessing cinema that DC fans deserve. Fortunately, with The Flash, it seemed like there was going to be more to it that made me excited for this movie. Not only was the recent quality of a few DC movies have really enlightened my interest in this particular movie, but there were also things in the film that showed a lot of promise. It had a decent director attached to it with Andy Muschietti, the guy who directed Stephen King's It. And more importantly, they brought back Michael Keaton, the Helm, the Cape, as Batman. Once again, this time he's teaming up with The Flash alongside Supergirl for another big potential epic adventure. And to me, that sounds exciting. So clearly things should be good now, right? It's not like there's anything else that could come around that will get this movie even more in trouble.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, that's a thing now. The actor playing the Flash, Ezra Miller, has gone through a lot of not so good things, and unfortunately out of his own doing. I won't and don't want to go into detail on what exactly they have done, but you can look that up later. But all you really need to know is that most people, myself included, got a sour taste in our mouths of Miller to the point where it doesn't really make us excited for this movie anymore. If it was Ezra Miller doing some of these things, that would be one thing, but here's the real kicker that has given this movie a bad taste. Enter the even bigger asshole of the group, the CEO of Warner Brothers, for whatever reason, wanted to still have this film be the big tentpole film of summer 2023. All in the mix of canceling shows and movies for no real reason than a tax write-off, and basically ruining HBO Max for no reason than just to boost his own stupid ego. Yet, this stupid fuck did all of this without really taking into consideration that maybe audience might not want to see a movie with an actual criminal as the lead. Like, you can't be this stupid if you're gonna cancel one DC project and not cancel the one that actually has an actor that is very questionable right now. And it's showing right now, as The Flash has not been doing very well at the box office, which I'm partially okay with, because if this means getting David Zalvas off of the Warner Brothers lot and into the streets, then I'm sorry, but this douche deserved to have his pet project flop. Kinda the same for Miller, who I don't really want to hate. I think they should just get help, and I want them to get better, but it's just really odd that there's all this hype and push for their big movie without really addressing the fact that maybe this person isn't the best right now. It's just an awkward situation. I can't believe they freaking did this. But now the Flash is finally here. And I think I rambled on enough to actually start talking about this movie, because it's been quite mixed to say the least. People say it's the best superhero movie since The Dark Knight, while others say it's a nightmare mess of a movie. I hate to say it, but the curiosity has gotten the best of me. As a film this divisive from DC, and that's saying something, was going to get me a tiny bit intrigued for better or for worse. Hence why I actually ended up seeing The Flash, because I wanted to make a review saying how I really felt. Now, before you go making any assumptions about me with this, I went to see this movie for free. I just happened to have a friend with me who vouched for my ticket because he works at a movie theater, which, Dan, if you're watching this, thank you so much. You really helped make this video possible. And second, I also wanted to address that regardless of what I say for this review, if you still don't want to see this movie because of Ezra Miller, I cannot fault that against you. I know there's a thing called separating the art from the artist, but I know not everyone can do that, and even people who can, like myself, could still feel uncomfortable giving any sort of support to someone like this, especially if they never seem to face any real consequences for it. So, honestly, no hard feelings if you still don't want to see this movie, even if I do say it's good. So, with that being said, is The Flash good? Okay, this might sound bad, but I'll say short answer is no, long answer is no with a but. The Flash I wouldn't call that good of a movie. Believe it or not, there are plenty of moments and aspects to this film that definitely shows that there is a competent movie in here somewhere. There are parts of The Flash that are actually kinda decent and not too shabby for the DCEU standards. But in the mix of it, you can still tell that this is a mess of a film that just feels hollow at the end of the day. The film does have some elements of surprise that does make this a little more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. Yet at the same time, there's just a lot about this movie that's hard for me to get by. And please consider that this is kind of speaking volumes coming from me, as I am the same person who liked Birds of Prey, the Snyder Cut, and Shazam 2. So it's saying something when I say that there are things in this movie that just aren't all that right. I will start out with the good this movie has to offer, because there are a few things. One thing that I would hate to say is good around this time, Ezra Miller does do a decent job as Barry Allen here. Of course, I'm judging their performance as an actor, not so much the person, because I always felt Ezra Miller was a good actor. Not only did I like their version of the Flash, but I've seen them in other movies where they also gave a really good, maybe even excellent performance. This is an actor that does admittedly have range from what I've seen, and this movie definitely shows that. One of the main things that occur in this film is that Barry has to literally interact with himself from another timeline. To their credit, Ezra Miller does a decent job playing off against themselves as they feel like different characters, with his older self being more in line and professional, while the younger self is a lot more obnoxious and immature. And the effects are fairly seamless with how they made both Ezra Millers interact on screen. There are moments that aren't as tightly written regarding this character in terms of what the film ultimately does, and sometimes he can come across as annoying, but for the most part, Ezra Miller does a decent job here. I just have to be a little honest. I mean, it's not like it's the first time we saw a good performance from someone that turned out to be bad. One other positive is that the other actors, for what they're given, are decent in this. The main two appealing factors of this movie are the inclusion of Supergirl and Michael Keaton as Batman. Supergirl in this, or Kara, was one of the main things I was actually looking forward to the most. She looked cool and badass. Like, if this Supergirl is related to Henry Cavill, then yeah, I totally see it. Sasha Calle does have a decent presence in this movie as this character, and I think she pulls off being this bitter, dark character quite well. Michael Keaton was admittedly something I had surprisingly an amount of fears towards in this movie, because some of it looked like he did not want to be there. It was starting to make me think of Birdman with him returning to this role, and not in a good way, considering how much he didn't look like he was into it to me.
$1 billion worldwide, guaranteed.
Though, to be fair, he's not too bad in this when we mostly see him as Bruce Wayne. He still has a presence, and I think he's able to work off with these actors fairly well, even if this is a strong possibility that this isn't the Tim Burton Batman universe, despite being the same actor. Needless to say, it is neat to see him as this character again at points. At the very least, Keaton does end up being a part of what I consider to be the best action scene in the movie. Also worth noting that for as little screen time he has, Affleck was good as Batman here yet again. Plus, one last thing to note, it was really cool to hear Elfman's Batman theme again in these movies. It's a good theme, so iconic, and put the decent use here that makes the music an alright highlight of the film. There are moments of The Flash that are likable, moments where I did laugh a bit, moments where I even felt sentimental with the kind of emotions it came across at certain points. There are ideas here that work, or at the very least had a lot of potential, as The Flash is essentially a multiverse movie. Naturally, there are things to expect with a multiverse movie, for better or worse. A lot of different variety of worlds to go to, or just tons of references to previously existing movies and shows, in terms of outcomes multiverse movies can have. Unfortunately, it ends up being more of the latter half. While it does play it self-contained enough, and you can tell that there is an attempt to make a good movie here, the multiverse angle surrounding this film they went with here felt like a desperate plea to make this as cinematic universe heavy as possible, which in some ways kind of ruins the movie for me. Especially after coming off of Spider-Verse 2, a movie that really experimented with the ideas of canon and what constitutes multiple different versions of the same character. This feels real lacking. There are attempts to have interesting ideas about alternate timelines and also leaving the past behind, but it's all undercut by a film that still has a lot of trappings of modern blockbusters, and oftentimes to a worse degree. While it is cool to see Michael Keaton as Batman again, there were just parts of this movie where they tried to call back to the original movies in some ways by saying a famous line or making a reference, and it just reeks of trying too hard to aim for nostalgia. Honestly, some of the lines Keaton says in the trailer for The Flash that are direct references to the '89 Batman movie are kind of cringe to me, and in the movie, it's not much better.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
I don't know, there's a part of me that just felt like they went too far with this one in terms of nostalgia bait. It also doesn't help that the characters of both Keaton and Kara are not that well developed in the grand scheme of things. The actors do a good job, and they have a presence, but neither one of these characters feel all that impactful to the story when you really think about it. With Michael Keaton's presence in the film, it ends on a note that didn't feel like his presence to the film mattered that much to me, thanks to the film ultimately undercutting him and not utilizing him or his Gotham that much. Kara is again played very well and has such a command to her role, but the character herself feels lacking as we don't know too much about her other than what's being told. I want to see this actress in a Supergirl movie of sorts. I just don't know if she'll end up being her again. Here's hoping she gets more development if they bring her on again, but for now, she does feel a bit lacking. Also, Michael Shannon, you want to talk about someone who didn't want to be here? He definitely looked like that to me here, I'll say that much.
Wow, this has just been such a pleasure. I'm such a lucky boy. I can't wait to go home.
All of these aspects that we see in other blockbusters are much apparent here, and it brings down the film quite a bit. Like, you can tell maybe at first this movie was made with a bit of confidence on being a fun time for audiences, but it was just bogged down by studio meddling to make this as audience crowd pleasing as possible in some honestly kind of tone deaf way, which that's not even taking into account what really made this film not so great. And oh boy, I had heard countless things about the CGI in this movie. And you know, looking at it, it's pretty great. If you compare it to Pirates of the Caribbean in 2006, back when they appeared in Kingdom Hearts 2 for the PlayStation 2. The special effects in this movie are honestly kinda awful. And that's mostly because a majority of the action scenes in this film are CGI heavy to a fault, which wouldn't even be so bad if it wasn't for how the effects just don't look finished. I keep hearing from early screenings that the CGI wasn't good, but they were giving it the benefit of the doubt because the effects weren't finished yet. All I can think of though, after hearing that, knowing that this movie was still coming out in a few weeks, was good luck. No disrespect to the animators working on this movie, because I imagine there was a lot of crunch time. But it also just amazes me how with all this time this movie got delayed, the effects are this bad. I'm not sure what the hell is going on with these special effects studios with all this CGI bullshit, but maybe it's starting to be time to think that we should not be so reliant on CGI. It's either we get this kind of unfinished CGI shit of The Flash, MODOK, and the nightmare that is the Little Mermaid remake constantly being the norm while waiting 10 years for an Avatar sequel with a fully CGI world that actually looks appealing. I think we need to set ourselves back a little bit. The action should be cool, and conceptually, some of it is neat, but it's just plagued by all these creepy human faces in CG. The only real good action scene in this movie was the one that barely used any CG, and it was actually well edited and fun. It was a sequence when the two Barrys arrived to Wayne Manor. It was decently edited, kind of well choreographed, and it was just kind of a fun sequence. Where was that effort put into the rest of the action in this movie? I guess Affleck's action scene was kind of okay, but even then, you just can't ignore how much bad CGI there is in here. The suit looks bad. The way the Flash runs looks like a damn PS3 loading screen. And the action is just so poorly rendered and looks unfinished. It's not like we haven't seen this character have a cool action scene in live action with this actor even. The Snyder Cut scene with him was awesome, and nothing in this film looks even remotely as good as that. Though, action is one thing. The CGI does deal with what I can honestly say is easily the most egregious moment in the entire movie. It's a scene so bad that it kind of ruins the movie for me. And I have no choice but to talk about it. So, spoiler alert, I'll give you a time code if you want to skip to it. But you have been warned. Of course, with a big gigantic blockbuster like this for DC, you want to go in on giving out some really cool cameos. The possibilities are endless with the amount of universes you can go to, and hey, DC has a lot on their plate. So what kind of special appearances do we get this time? Well, it's a sight to behold as this film decided to make the bold decision of bringing back this character. That's right, returning once again all the way back from the dead and enhanced with CGI, good old Christopher Reeve. No! Just, no! What are you doing? I mean, you could have done anything else. You could have brought in Linda Carter, animated Superman, Brandon Routh, Henry Cavill. Why did you have to go with a man who's been dead for nearly 20 years? It seems like the most desperate attempt at relying on nostalgia that I can think of. And don't get me even started on George Reeves being here in CG2. There's a whole can of worms with that appearance. But hey, you know, maybe this wasn't completely ill-intentional. Maybe this was their way of giving the actor tribute. Which, okay, maybe I can vibe with that. But here's the thing. Would it have killed you to make it look good? Like, why is the CGI this bad? Why does it look like Christopher Reeves is about to interact with Sora, Donald, and Goofy? Even taking the fact that he's not around anymore out of it, this should not be this bad. Harold Ramis in Ghostbusters Afterlife didn't look this bad. Neither did Tarkin in Rogue One. What happened? Also, what the fuck are you doing here, other Supergirl? Your other movie wasn't even good. Best DC movie since The Dark Knight, my ass. This wasn't even as good as Shazam 2. But I'll give it this. The other big famous cameo in this is one I actually kind of like. It is kind of cool to actually see the crazy idea that was Nicolas Cage's Superman coming into reality as well. It's kind of humorous and neat. I just wish the CGI wasn't so fucking awful. Oh my god. All these cameos here don't really feel like they have any other purpose other than just nostalgia bait, which admittedly, at least the other CGI humans of people who have passed that I mentioned earlier had a purpose in their movie. It doesn't help that after this cringe-inducing sequence, we get a moment that I actually kind of like. It's a very sweet moment between Barry and his mom that's super touching. It's all about Barry trying to move on from his lost parent. That is all about letting the past go and moving on from those lost people in a touching way. But having immediately before it a scene that is just a showcase of a studio not wanting to let go of their past with horrible CGI images of actors who aren't around, it felt about as awkward as seeing Will Smith's Oscar acceptance speech immediately after you know what.
Love will make you do crazy things.
Yeah, can't get behind this. Oh, one last note. The film also ends with Barry ending up in the same universe with Bruce Wayne, played by George Clooney. Very strange cameo that I'm gonna take a wild guess was reshot. My money is that Warner Brothers decided to be like, quick, let's put Ezra Miller in the DC universe no one wants to see rebooted. The worst thing about The Flash is that when all is said and done, this isn't the worst DC movie. It's not even the worst in recent memory. But to say this is the best DC movie in years, I beg to differ. Especially so soon after The Batman and The Suicide Squad. Like, bro, have you even seen those movies? This is kind of pathetic. It's a shame because there maybe is a good movie in here somewhere, and I can tell there was an attempt to salvage a film that has such a troubled production, but man, this is not how you do that. Not with CGI this bad and nostalgia bait this pandering. If you're able to see this for free and are curious, you might find some things that are alright in this. Like I said, there are good moments in this movie. However, if you ask me, just please stick to Spider-Verse. And Elemental as well. That one also needs a lot more appreciation. Or better yet, watch something actually really rad like Nimona or Asteroid City while you're at it. They're way better than this film, that's for sure. And I'm going to give The Flash a 4 out of 10. Yeah, that was my thoughts on The Flash. If any of you guys have seen it, what did you guys think of it? Or are there any other movies coming out this summer that you want to check out? Feel free to comment below, hit that red subscribe button and bell icon for more notification for videos, and I'll see you guys again in the near future. Later.
Me! Can it outrun the Flash?
You bet.
Can Superman outrun the Flash?
Sure, why not?